hope nobody got exposed to too much coronavirus while we're in break. Some people had scares. It's something we're actually going to talk about today because of the effect it's having on the world markets. We're going to talk about some of the effects it's having on world markets. Guys, just a couple of reminders. Right now, if you have not yet done your handshake profile, I know people are asking me, where do I submit that? You don't have to submit it anywhere. What it is I log onto the system, and I'm able to get to your profiles individually. So I'll be checking those out this week. If you haven't gotten it done yet, please get it done. Now, we have our first due date for the week. It's the rate of return exercise. It's due on the 11th, this Wednesday. If you have questions about how to calculate a rate of return, thank you for that, by the way. Hit me up. I'll gladly show you how to do that. We're going to be starting Chapter 4 today as well. It's nice to have this problem where our displays are not looking good because of all the sunshine, but we are getting into the second half of the semester. And here's an important thing, guys. There's something right now in front of me. What is on this screen? Do you see anything on this screen at all? Nope, there's nothing on there at all. What this refers to right here is a blank slate. That's what the second half of the semester is. So, if you did not have a good experience or you are not happy with your midterm grade, you've got half a semester to pull it up, and you've got lots of ways to do so. We had a couple of folks who did a really great debate before we went on break about hot dogs, whether or not they're sandwiches. We don't normally do that as a debate in this class. If there's a current topic you want to present on, it'll get you a couple of bonus points on an exam. Guys, you're going to have your stock game that's due at the end of March, first part of April. We're going to cover in depth as we go on. That can also boost your grade big time. We've got 2 more tests in this class. 1 more regular test, probably a final, maybe even an online exam to boost your grade. So if you're not happy with where your grade is, you got plenty of time. Here's the other thing I want you to tell me too, guys. If you need help on something, if you're struggling on any of these things, I'm here a lot, particularly in the second half of the semester. My office, 2nd floor. If you're not around during my office hours, tell me when you can be around, and I'll make arrangements to be around if you need some help. I want you to walk away from this semester with a grade that you're happy with. So we're going to be starting Chapter 4 today, which is all about ethics, and it's one of my favorite chapters to present. It's something that's very important. But we're going to start off talking a little bit about what's happening in the world right now thanks to the coronavirus. So sit back and what's going on with oil right now? Has anybody been paying attention to the news over the last 12 hours? What's going on?
Isn't it like really cheap to buy now?
It is bottoming out. Guys, for most of the time we've been together, the price of a barrel of oil has been around 50 bucks. It's hovering right around $30 a barrel right now, and there's some predictions it could go down as far as $20 a barrel. First of all, does anybody know what's causing this? Coronavirus is definitely part of it. Is there something else that's happening here as well? How's coronavirus, because you're right, how's coronavirus affecting the price of oil?
Importing and exporting costs like being low, or because of not a lot of people want to do travel and all that stuff.
So we got travel as part of it. What else do we got?
I would say people are just worried about it with travel as well.
So we got fears going with it as well. Yes, sir. Absolutely correct. Guys, think about this. Around you, we got laptops, we got cell phones, we got bags, we got bottles. What's a key component of that plastic bottle? Well, water's in it, but what makes the actual container? Petroleum goes into that. Petroleum goes into makeup. Petroleum goes into plastics. All these things that go into goods that we purchase. Is production going up or down in China right now? It's going down. Everybody's staying home in China, so we got reduced demand. Well, here's what else we have going on. Has anybody ever heard of a group called OPEC? What is OPEC? It's okay not to know. That's how we learn. OPEC is essentially what we refer to as an oil cartel. It's a bunch of Middle Eastern countries who have all agreed to coordinate on their pricing because they control most of the global supply of oil. These folks have been trying to negotiate with Russia, who is another global producer of oil, to cut price or to cut production. Why would they want to cut production right now? Why would you possibly want to cut production of oil? Any ideas? Yes?
So there's not so much of it in the market?
Because we have a glut in the market right now. We have too much supply and not enough demand. What happens to price? You got it. Anybody know what Russia said to OPEC? I'll give you a hint. It's between two of my fingers. That's exactly what Russia said to OPEC. We are not cutting production. So as a result, OPEC is saying, well, if you're going to play that way, we're going to increase production, so we're going to screw you guys by further driving the price down. So we've got competition right now over an asset that's depreciating in value, and as a result, we're going to have even more oil on the markets, which means, guys, you could be seeing sub $2 gasoline locally before this is all said and done. Is there somebody else who could suffer from cheap gas? I mean, if you drive a big honking SUV, that's a pretty good deal, right? $2 gasoline, right? If you got a truck that gets 12 miles a gallon, you're loving this. Who's not loving this beside OPEC? Well, electric cars for sure, because anytime the price of gas goes down, innovation ceases. We don't need higher gas mileage when gas is cheap. It's economics. Who else might be affected by this? Yes?
Public transportation.
Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, and when we get into public transport, we're not going to have those folks really having the incentive to produce newer or better ways of public transit because everybody can afford a car. I'm going to give you a hint. It's a word that begins with F, and it's not the one you're thinking of. FR. FRA. It's fracking. Fracking in Pennsylvania, fracking in the East Coast is a more expensive way of getting petroleum. Right now, as of today, who is the largest single producing country of petroleum in the world? We are. But maybe not for long. If the price of gas goes down too much further, it could not be profitable to drill in the long term. That's how gas prices can affect the economy in the United States. So keep your eye on this, guys. Anybody hear of a festival called South by Southwest? Biggest music festival in the country just got canceled. The whole economy of Austin, Texas is going to miss out on about $280 million of revenue this year because that festival got canceled. Anybody have tickets for music festivals this summer? Yeah, me too. I'm going to be watching to see if we still have those or not. So keep your eye on the news. This is how coronavirus is affecting all of us. Any questions or comments before we get into that? What do you guys think? Are we overreacting to coronavirus or not? What are your thoughts? How much do you guys know about it? Yes.
Well, I mean, I think it's an overreaction. Like, I still think people should be weary of who they're around and keep good hygiene. But everyone that's been dying from it's been old.
Yeah, it's true. Yes.
I think that. Wait, I don't know. Come back to me.
Oh.
That doesn't make sense. What I was just saying.
Sure. You know what? You'll have more and more of those moments the older you get. So it's okay. Anybody? Yes.
I think older generations are kind of stockpiling everything, rushing to stores and kind of taking it.
I tend to think that we should be cautious, but I don't really see where this is any worse than the last time we had bird flu or any of the other big epidemics that hit. What do you think is driving this reaction? Why are we all so hyper aware to this? Yes.
The media.
I would say media and one other thing. I'm sorry? I'm sorry, I'm not here to say that. China, for sure, they're definitely not sharing a lot of information. Is there a way that we all share information these days? You got it. I think social media is whipping us into a frenzy on this too. I'm not going to say it's not important. I mean, certainly somebody who dies from this is going to tell me, yeah, it was pretty important. But I think that we're in the long run, we're going to have to see how we reacted to this. Dylan, did your point come back to you?
Not really. It didn't really relate. I was just gonna say how some people don't actually know the facts about it, how it's pretty much the same thing as a strand of just a common flu.
There's an old expression in the media, and it's called "if it bleeds, it leads." And what that means is we'll put bad news on the front page, we'll put bad news on the television. People don't report good news. That does not sell advertising. That does not get our attention. So if somebody came out and said something very sane like you just said, they're not going to be the person they put on the front of the news broadcast. Yeah. So, but guys, keep your eye on this. It's going to affect the way we are interacting. Guys, what we're going to be talking about now, though, is ethics. Has anybody, by show of hands, who has ever heard of the term ethics? Does anybody know what it means? What is ethics, guys? Because it's something we have to talk about in business. If you had to say somebody is engaging in ethical or unethical behavior, what do we actually mean? Is there a good term for ethics? I know I'm asking a lot on the first Monday after break. By show of hands here, Who has ever had their parents sit them down to say, we're going to talk about right and wrong? I had that conversation. That's what ethics is all about. It's all about what we see to be right and wrong. We're going to be talking about the difference between something that's legal and something that's ethical. They're not the same thing. All of this stuff is important to you guys because someday you may be managing people. Someday you may be interacting with folks who depend on you to make good decisions. And it's not always easy or straightforward. We're going to be talking about how companies have made mistakes, bad things that companies have done, and things that companies can do better. We're also going to talk about why the idea of being in compliance with the law is only part of the equation. We need to understand who we are and what right and wrong is. Let me give you an example. Has anybody ever heard of the company Ashley Madison? What does Ashley Madison do?
It's a cheating website.
Yes. Their corporate slogan is, life is short, have an affair. All right. So is it illegal to cheat on your spouse? No, there is no law in the state of Pennsylvania that says you cannot cheat on your spouse. Is it ethical?
No.
Most people would say no. Here's where we get into ethics. Ashley Madison, about 3 years ago, got hacked by a group called Anonymous. Who has ever heard of Anonymous? Yeah, they're one of the biggest hacktivist groups in the world. Well, what they did, essentially, Anonymous started publishing the names of people who were using Ashley Madison to cheat on their spouses. Guess what happened next? Anybody know what happened next? That's when the suicides started. So people who had their names published, basically saying, look, this person is cheating on their spouse, rather than face up to what happened or what they had done, people started killing themselves. Now, we can argue whether or not the the ethics of cheating on your spouse warrants somebody killing themselves or somebody deserves to die. I don't personally believe that somebody makes a mistake like that should be condemned to die or should kill themselves. But ultimately, Ashley Madison was selling confidentiality and for something that was, by most standards, an unethical service, even if it was legal in the first place. In addition, you may have to decide what kind of company do you want to work for. Do you want to work for a company that does these kinds of things? So that's the stuff we need to think about when we start talking about ethics and compliance. We're also going to be talking about some examples of how companies have screwed up. Can anybody, other than Ashley Madison? Oh, by the way, guys, if you don't have something in front of you to write with, please take some notes on this stuff. I'm going to be telling you what's on the test, guys. Can anybody tell me a time when a company did something unethical? Yes?
Well, they say like Apple and everything, they basically have sweatshops. People say that.
So we're outsourcing our labor to countries where maybe people are being mistreated. Questionable ethics, yes? I think there's something to it. By show of hands, how many people believe that the cell phone companies plan their phones to go obsolete? I do too. I hate it. Yes?
It's like companies firing people who've been there for a while, like, just because they make too much money now.
It's a big issue. And it's honestly, when you get to be in my stage of life, that becomes a bigger concern. Because somebody who is older, who has been at a company longer, tends to make more money. And yeah, we'll get rid of the old folks and pay younger people less. Absolutely. Is there another ethical issue in the news? Something else you could think of where a company really screwed up? Yes?
What about Apple settling about the batteries? They're
The $29 battery replacement.
yeah. They were faulting people on their batteries, or the software was slowing down their things.
Yep, they were trying to incentivize people to buy new phones by making their batteries go down.
Yeah.
My 6S, my vintage 6S, is part of that situation. These are all good examples, guys. And we're going to be talking about a couple of noteworthy companies. Guys, but what the question is after you've done this, how do you get back in the good graces of your customers? Apple said, hey, we're going to try by giving people $29 battery replacements. Well, great. Volkswagen, when they screwed up, they said, we'll buy your car back. Volkswagen has still never recovered its market share from their diesel scandal. People don't trust them. A lot of people, when Apple did what they did with their batteries, jumped ship and went to Android or went to a Samsung phone. It's really tough. We, as the general populace, want to see that when people screw up or do bad things, that they get punished for it. It's just how we're wired. And we also have to think about what is just punishment. Guys, what we're going to spend some time this morning, though, is showing you some examples of how companies have screwed up. How many people have ever heard of what happened with the Ford Pinto? Guys, I'm going to show you some crash test footage of a Ford Pinto. Family who work in the coal mining industry. West Virginia is one of the most prominent states in the country for coal mining. A lot of people make their money there. There's a place called Upper Big Branch that was run by Massey Mining Company. Now, if you're drilling into the earth, the stuff comes out of the earth called methane. Methane has a very volatile property. Anybody know what happens to methane if it gets around flame? It's a flammable gas. So when you're coal mining, you need ventilation to take that gas away from people who are working in the earth. Well, Massey Mines had gotten multiple violations because their ventilation systems kept plugging up and they weren't fixing them. The guys who own Upper Big Branch basically said, can we get one more load of coal out of here before this mine explodes? It ended up exploding during a shift, and several hundred miners were trapped underground. Most of them died from asphyxiation from being burned to death under the ground. There were garment factory fires in India in the 1990s. And here's where we get into international ethics. If we're working in a hot sweatshop environment and the building catches fire, you may ask yourself, why didn't people just run out? Well, the reason that the factory workers didn't run out is they were locked in the factory from outside because the people who ran the factory wanted to make sure people weren't taking bathroom breaks and walking away from the job. So people burned to death because they were locked in the room. When we get into Enron, who here knows anything about the Enron scam? Enron was a company that was based in Texas, and right before the financial meltdowns of the early 2000s, the people at the top of the company knew that that company was going under, so they sold their stock and depleted the reserves of the company for their own gain. Why is Penn State up here? Jerry Sandusky. About half the training that we go through in the university system these days is because of what Penn State did in failing to protect students. And then we get into also the Firestone Tire Ford Explorer issue. The Firestone tires on Ford Explorers would come apart under heavy handling, resulting in rollovers. These are how companies repeatedly screw up, guys. Who here knows how Volkswagen screwed up? What did Volkswagen do? Yes?
Didn't they have a lot of EPA problems? Like a couple years ago?
They absolutely did. You know what they were?
They lied about the emissions. They said they were cleaner than what they actually were.
You got it. They had diesel cars. Anybody here have a diesel or a diesel car or truck? Yeah, diesel is a desirable option because of lots of torque, high fuel efficiency. Well, Volkswagen was selling their diesels in the U.S. They called them clean diesel. We basically could get good fuel efficiency and lack of emissions. Diesel was a less refined form of petroleum. Well, as it turned out, if you plugged a Volkswagen into an emissions scanner, it would actually lie to the computer and say it was more efficient than when it really was. And the average Volkswagen, we're talking a small Golf, a diesel Golf, was putting more pollution into the air than a Chevy Suburban, even though it was a small car. As a result, because they lied to the general public, they paid billions in fines, and some of their executives actually did jail time. It's pretty amazing how this stuff happens. Guys, all of these things, at some point, are a failure of ethics. There are certain things that we can generally agree that are right and wrong. Most people, if I ask in this room, by show of hands, and lie to me on this one if you don't agree with me, by show of hands, how many of you think it's wrong to kill somebody without a reason? Yeah, I think the folks who haven't raised their hands, I'm going to make sure I stay on the good side of you guys. But we have certain things we agree on. How many people think it's ethically right to make sure you're respectful to your mother? I hope you're raising your hand. Moms are awesome. We have things that we generally agree on, but most of us have things that we don't. I'm not asking this question in this room because it's a very personal thing, but if I ask people about things like whether or not they believe in God, or if I ask them about abortion, or if I ask them about whether or not we should have welfare, there's a variety of opinions that's represented in this room because we all have different opinions. We do not have moral absolutes in this country. The basic things we pretty much agree on. We like people who have integrity. We like people who are honest. We're Americans, man. We love courage and self-sacrifice. People who are not nice. People who are cruel. Somebody who's not nice to animals, for example. If you're not nice to dogs, I probably won't like you because that's a general thing. We don't like people who are cruel. But when we get into the finer points of ethics, it can be a lot more complicated. You guys have inherited a very complicated world when it comes to ethics. one of the things we always talk about in academia, and I am using this as a bit of a soapbox, it is so easy to copy and paste, isn't it? We can go onto a million websites and find information to put into our papers. And it's not just you guys, it's not just undergraduates. We see it in the corporate world. We see it people working on doctoral degrees. It's so hard to determine where our intellectual property begins and ends these days. The first questions we got to ask ourselves when we're looking at any ethical dilemma, I mean, these questions are pretty basic. First of all, is it legal? Just because something is legal doesn't mean it's morally right, but is it legal? Most of our legal system is based on the 10 Commandments in the United States. Whether or not we say we have separation of church and state, and I leave that ethics of that up to you, a large part of the laws in our country are based on Christian ethics. Is it balanced? Meaning, are we making a fair decision? And finally, guys, this is a big one. How do you feel? All right, I'm going to put you guys out on a line here, but let's see how honest everybody can be today. How many of you have ever lied to your mom? Yeah. How'd it feel? Yeah, you get physical sensation?
I don't feel that bad.
Oh, it's okay.
If I don't get caught, I'm not gonna feel it some type of way.
I'm gonna feel no. Unless it's like something deep.
Yeah.
Like something deep. Like
Nah, I
I
saw
lied about something deep over the spirit.
Wow. See, I remember I lied to my mom. I felt it right here, man. I knew it the whole time I'd done something wrong. My gut would twist and turn because I knew I had lied to the person I loved the most in this world. Believe me. Everybody's got their own standard for this. But sooner or later, if it makes you feel bad, if you're doubting yourself, if it ruins your self-esteem, you're probably doing something that's unethical. It's just something we feel. And this kind of corruption, guys, we see it affect our world all the time. Bernie, by the way, this is amazing. The guy who is responsible for the biggest financial fraud in history has the last name Madoff. That's really his last name, guys. Like, don't invest with somebody whose last name is I'm going to steal your money or I'm going to cheat you. Like, I mean, if I were dating a girl named Sally, I'm going to cheat on you no matter what. It's amazing. This guy was basically running a Ponzi scheme for billions of dollars. Who here knows what a Ponzi scheme is?
God dang.
Pretty crazy, huh?
You got 150 years.
Yeah, he's never going to get out of jail. You know what a Ponzi scheme is?
150 years. He's 81 right now.
He is never going to see the light of day again. But check this out, guys. Here's how a Ponzi scheme is. I had this great idea, and I got these guys investing with me. I'm going to give you good return on your investment. What you guys got to do is get more people to invest in your stuff so it comes back to us and we all make more money. So these guys, get these guys invested. They get these guys invested. Sooner or later, we get everybody invested. It's ultimately what we refer to as a pyramid scheme. So you got the person up top who gets these folks investing, who get these folks investing, and it goes on and on. And basically, the person up top is making unrealistic promises saying, I can get you a ridiculous rate of return on your investment. And ultimately, the paybacks never usually reach past the second level. The trick is you got to keep the scheme going. Here's what happened to Bernie Madoff. Bernie essentially kept this scheme going up until the financial recession of 2008. Guys, you remember what happened in 2008? What crashed? Stock market because of housing, right? All right, let's say, for example, we're getting all this good rate of return on our stocks, and all of a sudden, I'm getting no rate of return, but my investments with Bernie, he's still promising me great rates of return. Well, you're the only guy who's working for me, so I'm going to pull my money out because you made me some money. As soon as these folks started pulling their money out, the whole thing collapsed, and everybody found out, essentially, he had been lying to them. People lost millions of dollars in this scheme. And Bernie himself basically said, it's their fault, they should never have believed me. That was his answer, basically. Not, I'm sorry, not, I did something terrible. He basically said they were idiots to believe me. And this is what we can find ourselves getting into in this world. Bernie Madoff. His real name is Madoff. I'm not even kidding. We talked about plagiarism, guys. It's a big problem, but it's not just a problem with you guys. Check this out. The guy from Yahoo, not the most recent CEO before they got bought by Verizon, but the CEO before that lied about having a master's degree he didn't have. Guess what happened to him when he got found out?
Did he go to jail?
He didn't go to jail, but he got fired. Yeah, the board is basically saying we're not gonna sit for this. If that's how dishonest you are, can you run our company? So guys, we start at the top. Let me give you an example. If I were grading your papers, guys, listen up, guys. If I were grading your papers, and all of a sudden, a couple of you, like Lewis here, he got a 50% on his last exam, but he bought me a bottle of wild turkey, and all of a sudden he got 100% on his exam.
Wait, that works.
Yeah. What are you guys going to think about me? Can you trust me at this point?
No, I know the line that can.
Yeah.
So I don't like wild turkey. If you're going for that, give me Jim Beam, a nice big bottle. But what I'm saying here is you lead by example. Guys, if I came into this class every day and I stood up here and didn't move a muscle and stood straight ahead and talked to you guys, what message am I sending to you?
That you're not very interested in what you teach.
That I don't care at all, I'm not interested, and if I'm not interested, neither should you be. Now, sometimes all the enthusiasm in the world, guys, listen up, sometimes all the enthusiasm in the world still can't get people in at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, but you got way more of a shot of setting a good example. If you're a manager, you got to set the rules for the organization. You got to walk the walk and talk the talk. People who work for unethical people are facing the challenge whether or not they're actually going to be ethical. Check this out, guys. Who here knows what happened with Wells Fargo about 3 years ago? Anybody here have a Wells Fargo account? Guys, check this out. Wells Fargo had all these folks who were coming in as new hires. I'm talking folks who were working in personal finance. And they set these goals for these new hires. Basically, you have to get X number of new accounts every single day or you're not going to make your numbers. Now, the numbers they were asking for were completely unreasonable. They basically were goals that nobody could accomplish. As a result, the folks at Wells Fargo were creating, the folks who got hired were creating fake accounts to hit their own numbers. Now, it can be argued the people who got hired, the young finance employees, they were doing something unethical. They were lying. They were doing so to try to make up for a goal that was completely unreasonable. So sometimes when we set unreasonable targets, we have people doing unethical things to get there. If we think about the world of athletics, think about how many people have engaged in cheating or doping to try to be the best because the standards are so high. So what affects the way we look at these things? Guys, lots of things. Who are you? What do you value? Where do you come from? What is your family like? Your family sets a pretty good template for how you look at things. Some people come from families that believe different things than others. Your religion, your faith, your background. All those come from your family and where you come from. But you're born with a personality. I have a twin brother, and he and I could not be more different. We were raised in the same household with the same parents. You wouldn't even think we were related if you met us. Then we get into the organization, and that is, when you get into this organization, how does it reward performance? Does it reward ethics? Does it reward people for doing the right thing? And what about your environment? Are you in a very competitive environment? And then we get into a cultural environment as well. Some cultures, for example, around the globe, see bribery as completely acceptable. In the United States, on an official level, we don't. But individual cultures have different standards. You need to know where you're operating. Trust me, guys, if you're doing business in the Middle East, for example, doing bribes and paying people off may be part of the price of doing business. That doesn't mean I'm telling you it's right. I'm telling you it might be part of the system that you're dealing with. So, before we get into the difference between compliance and integrity, I would like a question or comment from somewhere in the room. Give me a break. Since this is our first day back. Question or comment? What did I do over spring break? I graded a lot of papers, watched a lot of Netflix, hung out with my dog. That was my whole spring break. And exotic.
What you watch on Netflix?
What I watch on Netflix? Well, when I say Netflix, I'm saying streaming in general. My wife and I are hacking our way through the Handmaid's Tale right now, which is has anybody watched that show? It's fantastic. It's on Hulu.
What's going
It's called The Handmaid's Tale, and what it's about is about a future society where essentially people live in a country that used to be the United States. It's become this oppressive regime. It's really good. So I'm watching that, and I'm getting ready to start diving into the next season of Ozark. What do you guys watch over break? Who did some binging over break?
I watched Angel Sunday.
Was it good? Are you talking about the movie? The one with Al Pacino? That was good. That was a 90s film, wasn't it? Like late 90s, early 2000s? I think I saw that in the theater, actually. That was good. Anybody else watch anything good over stream?
The Witcher?
Is it worth it?
I don't know.
Did you like it?
I was just watching.
So you wouldn't say it was awesome?
I was
but
watching no action, that's it.
okay, so it was okay. It wasn't something you're going to say, hey, this is fantastic. One more person. What else do you guys stream over break? Yes.
South Park.
That's always good.
6 seasons.
It never gets old. It never gets old and it never ceases to offend. Like if you have a button, it'll find it. Well, guys, we're going to talk a little bit about the difference in ethics codes. If you say somebody lives with integrity, if we say, hey, that's a person of high integrity, what do I mean by that? Yes. They live honestly. They are who they say they are. They represent themselves. They are who they say they are. They live with integrity. I do what I say I'm going to do. If we say that you're in compliance, what do I mean by that? If I say you're in compliance with my rules, what do I mean? You're following the rules. If you're in compliance, you're following them. So somebody who complies does what they're told. Somebody who has integrity does it because it's the right thing. You can make unethical people follow the rules. That's just the way it is. For example, there are people who have no problem with being mean, rude, or unkind. You can have rules in their organization, your organization, that dictate their behavior. More powerful ethics codes, however, are integrity-based ethics codes, and that means people are being encouraged to do the right thing because it's the right thing. You're never going to have 100% of people in your company who believe in what you believe, but you can make them follow the rules. So that's the difference. If we're talking rules, we're talking compliance. If we're talking doing the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing, we're talking integrity. Make sense so far? Okay. Guys, we're going to continue. I think it's worse to have an ethics code that you don't enforce than it is to not have an ethics code at all. Why do I think so? I think it's worse to have rules that you don't enforce than to not have rules at all. Why do I think that? Any thoughts? Why is that worse, guys? Yes. Why is it worse to have rules you don't enforce than not have rules at all? I think it lulls us into a false sense of security. If we say, for example, we really care, a customer comes first, but ultimately you get treated like garbage in a company, it's a false sense of security. So if you're not going to enforce the rules, why bother even having an ethics code? So in terms of how we manage, guys, in terms of how we go between these codes, if you got, again, we're not going to cover all these. A compliance-based ethics code means basically you've got laws and standards of conduct. An integrity-based ethics code means you're spending time really teaching people about right and wrong, about things like respect. For example, we've got laws in this country for equal employment opportunities, and we've got laws against racism. You can make people be nice. You can make people give opportunities. You can't make them change their minds with an integrity or with a compliance-based ethics code. You got to get into integrity to really start teaching that sort of stuff. How do we improve where we are ethically at this point? I think the bottom line on this is it starts at the top. If you look at Volkswagen, for example. Does anybody know why Volkswagen got in the situation they did with diesel? Why did Volkswagen cut so many corners?
I don't know. Why did they?
I'm glad you asked that question. Any guess? Like, why do people cut corners in general?
To get to their team faster?
Yeah, they want to sell faster, yes.
Save money.
Save money, absolutely. Guys, Volkswagen basically said, and this was about 5 years before the scandal broke, we want to be the largest auto company in the world. We want to sell more cars than anybody else. And they did. They hit it. Well, they did it at a cost. And here's what the interesting part is about 10 years before that, Toyota did the same thing. They said that we wanted to be the largest car company in the world. And they accomplished it. I don't know if you guys remember this, but Toyota also in their Prius models, their early Priuses, suffered from something called sudden acceleration. And that meant, for no reason at all, you would be driving down the road and the car would start speeding up on its own. ended up resulting in a series of deaths because people could not stop the cars they were in. The accelerator would get stuck. And it was because they dropped their quality standards and the pursuit of profits the same way that Volkswagen did. So when we pursue profit above all else, sometimes things go by the wayside. But you have to have companies that are run by people who care about quality, who care about taking care of people, or if all you're after is profits, you're going to find that maybe at the expense of other things. And you got to be willing to train people who are part of your companies. We also have something too called a whistleblower, guys. Who has ever heard of that term? Do you know what it means?
Whenever something's going wrong, like something unethical is going on in the company, the person who like basically tells on.
Exactly right. Let's say, for example, God forbid, because I'm recording this, if you guys noticed that it was like 2 weeks in a row, I'm wobbling into class, reeking of wild turkey. I appear to be slurring my speech, and although I'm very entertaining, you're not learning very much from watching me pass out at the front of the classroom. Who could you report me to? Yes?
You could report to like Father Malachi or something, but I have a question.
Yeah.
So with whistleblowers, one of the Astros pitchers is one who like exposed their cheating scandal. What's your opinion on him? Like, do you think that if you're like part of the team, you should like, was it right for him to like throw his whole team under the bus since he wasn't on the team anymore?
That's a really good question.
He didn't expose them while he was on the team. It was only after he left, after like they wouldn't resign.
Guys, listen up. John's got a really good question here. Here's my question back to you about that individual. What do you think his motivation was?
To win.
So it's,
obviously he knew that they were going to beat him by cheating.
so he wanted to knock out the competition.
Yeah.
I think that what it comes down to is sometimes we can do the right thing for the wrong reason or the wrong thing for the right reason.
He's gotten like a lot of support, but a lot of baseball players are against him because he waited to do it until he was off that team. Like he knew they were cheating for like 2 or 3 years.
If the guy had made the whistleblower complaint while he was on the team because it affected his personal ethics, I think that would carry a lot more credit than somebody doing it to knock out a competing team. Now, technically, what he did in terms of the actual action itself may still be ethical, even if his motivations behind it are not. So I think it's pretty clear that this guy was probably doing this for the wrong reasons because he wanted to get ahead in the game. Ultimately, is this going to win him any points with other fans?
It could. I think with a lot of older fans, it would win them over because older people are by the book whenever they've done like the right way.
It's true.
But I think like with younger people, there's like a big stigma to like don't tell any people. That's gonna hurt.
Yeah, and what you just illustrated, by the way, is the complexity of ethics within companies. Because let's say, for example, if I find out, I work for St. Francis University, and I find out, wow, something really bad is happening here, and people are getting hurt because something is going wrong. Let's say, for example, I found out, and this is me making this up, let me be clear, this is not true, this is something I'm making up. I find out there's a dangerous mold that's growing in the football field down here, which is a $2 million field. If I don't say anything, the people who are susceptible to mold are going to be getting lung infections. Some people with asthma may even go to the hospital. If I do say something, it's going to cost my employer $2 million to fix it. At that point, what's the right thing for me to do? What is the right thing, guys? I would think reporting is the right thing. Now, if I fear for my job, if I don't have the protection of a whistleblower, if I don't have an anonymous way to report this, I'm putting myself at personal risk. And the point of whistleblowing and whistleblower laws is to protect people who are trying to do the right thing. And we're going to talk about times in which whistleblowers have been punished. I mean, it's taking a risk. So we definitely want to make sure. And to go back to the point I was making, if I showed up drunk for class 2 weeks in a row, somebody said they could go to Dr. Fry, you absolutely could. You would be going to somebody beside me to lodge the complaint, so you've got some degree of anonymity and protection, so you can say something is going wrong that needs to be righted without having to have a confrontation with somebody who has power over you. Like right now, if you're criticizing me, I give you your grades. So that could be an intimidating situation, which is why we always have fail-safes and well-run organizations for people to report problems. You also, guys, have to apply this to everybody, meaning your outside contractors, people who are coming onto campus. If we had subcontractors who were working on the football field, or I should say working on the track, and they were making lewd comments to our female track and field athletes. That violates our code of ethics too, so we need to make sure we're controlling those folks as well, and you got to enforce it equally. If you let somebody go, and then you punish somebody else, for example, if I get punished for saying something in class that one of my fellow colleagues said in another class, that's not fair enforcement. So we got to be fair and ethical and equal about this. Guys, if you are making the decision that it's time to blow the whistle, number one, you've got to decide that you've got the facts on your side, that you know how to report this. Is there an 800 line? Or are you talking to an outside agency? For example, if you're working in a situation where public health is concerned, you might be calling the police. Breaking and entering, getting into files to gather information is not going to help you. You need to have legally gotten the information and to make sure that you've got a tight case and you're not seeing things wrong. I'm going to actually show you a video about somebody who paid the ultimate price for being a whistleblower. The name of this person is Karen Silkwood, and she was a whistleblower in the nuclear industry in the 1970s. I have a brief video I'm going to show you in terms of what some of the risks are of being a whistleblower and why WES does not always come without risks. And the reason we have laws to protect whistleblowers is because of people like Karen Silkwood. So guys, don't forget, this Wednesday your rate of return is due. Don't also forget to keep up with what you're doing with your stock portfolios, because that date in April is going to come up quicker than we realize. And guys, it's a clean slate second half of this semester. If you weren't happy with your midterm, let's get it together. Let me know how I can help. Have a great day, guys.